Evening, folks. Just a little bit ago, I started putting up some shorts on YouTube, and it's winter here, so I thought I'd take a stab at some longer form content and try maybe add a little bit of history and maybe some things that you didn't know about the 9130 that isn't already out there. And so here we go. The 9130 is a slight modification over the previous design of the 1891 Mosin Nagant. And why I say just a slight modification, because they only did two things to the rifle. The rear sight on 9130 is measured out in meters, whereas the original 1891 had the Imperial Arshin as its sight system. Now, an Arshin is, I believe, roughly 28 inches to one of their Arshins, and one of their Arshins being their version of a yard or meter. So basically, if you do have an 1891 and you've never shot it, or you have shot it and are having issues of the rifle shooting incredibly low, either take a 12 o'clock hold on whatever you're shooting at, or you're probably going to have to do something like 150, if not 200 Arshin sight setting. And get you probably roughly on, at least in the general vicinity of where you're aiming. And the only other thing they did during that modification process was took something like 4 inches off the total length. Now, except if you've had one of these, you're still aware that even with the 4 inches taken off the overall length of the rifle, the 9130 is still a long rifle. Especially once you combine that with the cuneiform spiked bayonet. Because the Russians love their bayonets. Even when, for the most militaries, they were pretty much out of fashion at that point in time. And in a lot of ways, the 9130 is a bit of a throwback rifle. Starting with bayonet. Now, most of your rifles at the time, when they were using bayonets, have the underslung system. There's usually something that looks like an I-beam coming off this part of the rifle, and then the whole thing just snapped onto that point. Whereas a 9130, like our old bayonets you see in the Civil War movies, you had the socket style, which actually went over and locked onto the front sight. And then the other thing that's a bit of anachronistic about this rifle is outside of your few N-block systems, most notably your Steyrs and Italian rifles, the 9130 stayed with a 5-round straight magazine. No stagger box magazine, just straight 5 rounds. Now, the 9130, like I said, been around for a very long time, dating back to 1891, because, like I said, there really isn't much of a difference between this and the 1891. So it's literally the longest serving rifle, because as we are well aware, even up to today, it's still being used. More often than not, though, it's like the PPU version, or the PU version, I should say, sniper rifle. And then you got the cartridge that goes with it. Is definitely going to be on the books for the longest service cartridge ever. Now, when this rifle first started coming into the country, they were mostly the refurbished rifles that have been sitting in Soviet warehouses since the tail end of World War II. And as you can see, this one, like probably like the ones you have in your collection or you've seen online, has a lovely orangish red color. Now, this comes from the storage method that the Russians used after World War II, after they went through the check and make sure everything was right. They literally just covered the stocks in shellac. And for you those that don't know, shellac is, simply put, bug juice. It's made from the secretions of bugs and the basically crushing up in their exoskeletons. So that's why they look the way they do. Because otherwise, as you see that color right there, it's just kind of poking through. It'd be more of a beach color. Anyway, get right down to it. The mounting system for the sling is also a bit old school. Now, this rifle has been called a garbage rod due to issues with the firearm. Most notably is that when you're shooting these, and if you see any kind of YouTube videos about these, you will see a lot of people having issues with the initial extraction, or throwing the bullet to its 90 degree, and then the extraction itself. And the rifle seems to catch most of the flack for that, as being just a crappy build. Now, I tend to lean away from that particular line of thinking, because I've shot regular old Russian ammo, and I've shot Czechoslovakian ammo, and I've had a little bit of issues with both, but a lot of issues with the Czech rounds. And what I mean by that is, when I first got this rifle, like most people, I went to the surplus ammo route, because cheap ammo. But when I got into this, I had a handful of duds overall, but for the most part, it worked quite well. Went off when you pulled the trigger. But what I had, though, was a lot of issues with felt recoil from round to round. You could have a really strong hit to something not so bad as far as 7.62 54R goes. And between that and just messing up my bolt, like I said, for me, it wasn't on the battery getting it pulled out of there. It was literally just getting the bolt to the 90 degree throw. It had like to catch a lot. And what I figured out with that was, and I don't have an example of it, is that the primers on every single round was cratering, which is a absolute sign of overpressure. Now, the kicker with that is that I always come up and had two things. One is a condition that was specifically to this Czechoslovakian ammo. And another one I always wondered about is that by the time these guns and this ammo was being shipped out of Russia, you're looking at 70s and 80s. And the only thing using 54R at that point in time was your machine guns and your Dragunovs. So is it possible that the formulation of the powder to that time frame might have been a little hotter than what literally, like this one was? That's actually dated 1946. Like I said, it might be just a little bit hotter because it was only meant to be used in belt-fed machine guns and semi-automatic sniper rifles. So in other words, to ensure good functionality of those firearms, maybe the ammo's hotter. Or it's the case like I have with this Czechoslovakian stuff, is that somewhere in its lifetime, the storage of it wasn't quite what we would call proper. And the entirety of the inside of the case rusted. To the point where when I went to actually start to tear this stuff apart, I had a heck of a time actually getting the bullets out of the casings because of the buildup of rust. Just about sealed those bullets permanently in. And which leads me to the other thing that I've never been able to find an answer to online, so maybe you guys can leave a comment down the bottom. What does rust, when it's impregnated throughout the gunpowder, do to gunpowder? Like, will that account for my felt recoil differences from the different rounds? Is that the presence of, what is that, basically iron ferrite would amplify the charge? That's what I want to say. Okay, and let's see, what else can we say about the 9130? Oh, yeah, like I said, garbage rod. So the accuracy of a M9130 isn't as bad as, at least in my example, and this is a 43 Tula. So mid-war, which means they weren't exactly taking the best care of quality control, I guess you could say, because at that time frame, it was just rifles out the door as quickly as they could. I mean, if you look into the barrel here, if you can see it in the line, you can actually see the tooling marks from the lathe work. It was no effort to smooth this out. It was just out the door as quick as you can. But even with just cheap factory Tula, that was in the ballpark at a torso-sized target at 600 yards. And with the hand loads, using IMR 4895, I believe. Yep. And those check bullets, consistent hits at 600 yards. So as far as the functionality, the accuracy of the rifle, there's not a whole heck of a lot of a problem there. Though I will say that the trigger pull of a 9130 is atrocious. That's probably one of the worst triggers of any rifle I've ever fired. I mean, it gets the job done, but it is quite possibly one of the worst triggers I've ever pulled. Now, something that I actually learned not too long ago about my 9130 is that the sight here can be walked from its 100 meter all the way up to its highest setting in 50 meter increments. Let's see if I can do this without tipping it over. Just by popping these two buttons, you can just walk it up 50 meters at a time. So just not done that long ago. That may be a handy little thing for someone who wants to adjust their sights a little bit nicer than what you would normally want to do. And the one thing about a 9130 is the front sights. Now these were sighted in, as far as I'm aware, with the bayonet attached, so which of course would pull your barrel down a little bit, which is why even at 100 yards, which is, you're going to shoot a little high because meters and the whole thing, but meters and yards, but it tends to shoot high at 100 yards, is because of the whole thing of dragging the barrel down because of the weight of a bayonet. The simple thing with that one is, if you really want to fix that, is you can go online and just look for the front sights with a taller post, and you can switch them out. It's fairly easy. So at one point in time, I had a finished capture that shot insanely high at 100 yards. Switched out the front sights to a taller post, and she walked right into normal Mosin ranges. So that's basically what I got off the top of my head for you. The M1891/30 Mosin Nagant. Either you love them or you hate them. Oh, good night, folks.